say that's not the case of being in favor or in opposing something what is really a fact. As we see nowadays, all the universities has transferred their activity into the online modus. Schools, educational institutions, everybody is teaching in online mode. Why? Because the situation requires this. So this is a matter of fact. At the same time, obviously, this situation has benefits and some opportunities, some challenges. And I think this is very important to keep in mind that this is a very good chance to develop educational systems. In terms of the person, obviously we can reach out to much bigger number of people who are potentially involved into the educational process. They can have the more opportunities also for the self-learning and self-study, which is a very good habit for any student. At the same time, this is difficult because there is a much less communication and exchange and tutorship between the student and the teacher. And the side of the system, the educational system, they obviously required innovations, and online education is one of them. So this is a question, this is the future development, this is certainly a direction which we have to go. At the same time, we have to consider that in broader terms, the so-called distance learning is nothing new, because it has been developed already in the 19th century when institutions and people have corresponded, exchanged knowledge and information through letters. Then there has been a number of courses, online education offer through radio, using the radio waves or television. It was already in the 20th century. And in this century, we are using internet, using different platforms. So this is like a history which is now developing towards this mode, and at the same time we have to consider that there are different options of so-called distance learning. So it could be really online, where the teacher does not have contact with the students at all, it's fully automatized, or it could be also a blended learning, where we have the more opportunities to introduce the interaction between the student and the professor. So we have more like synchronic and asynchronic relations between the teacher and the students. All of them have their good and bad sides, but generally this is the development which we expect to come and to progress. That's indeed a critical issue and very different aspects. Let's speak about the roles. I'm not sure if a teacher is the person who is the only source of knowledge or the main source of knowledge in the traditional learning system. Even in the classroom, being a teacher, being especially academic teacher, you expect your student to interact with you during the course of lecture or especially the seminar. And here it's a very important issue that students have to be prepared, so they have to invest some self-study in learning about the topics which will be tackled during the lecture. And I think that additional component in the online learning, which is a very positive one, gives them more emphasis on the self and independent learning of the student. So potentially the interaction with the teacher is strengthened by the knowledge which the student will receive in their own capacities, independent learning. And at the same time, that's very important also about the critical thinking, that it strengthens the critical thinking of a student, that when a student acquires information from different sources, she has the opportunity to assess this knowledge, to compare the different information and try to reveal where is the truth, where is the objective argument. This is especially important in social sciences, where the discourse is based on the critical thinking, or should be. So here in these terms you see already the very big difference between the traditional learning and the distance online learning, because it somehow makes it more difficult to develop this critical thinking, because the critical thinking, it's obviously based on the information which comes from the different sources to the students through the independent learning, but first of all through the interaction with the teacher and with the classroom, with the scholars who are also sitting in the classroom. So probably that's much more challenging to keep the good level of the critical debate within the lecture or seminar which is taking place in the online mode. So it has to be at least balanced. And in the terms of relations between the student and the teacher, how the distance learning impacts it, I'm quite sure that it's a very big impact. I mean, in the traditional learning, students very much rely on the contact with the person, with the teacher, to have the opportunity to ask the question. If they may not necessarily have asked the right question, to really receive the information which they need, the teacher from the little bit broader perspective can always find out the better approach to answer the real question, which maybe sometimes student is not even able to spell out. So the question of the relation is also very much based on the trust, and the trust it's built on the relation, I mean in the relation. So if you meet somebody in the classroom, you interact quite frequently, sometimes you have more difficulties, sometimes less difficulties, but the relation is progressing. When you have online education, especially those fully automatic, when there is just a couple of videos and assessment questions and the note at the end, there is no interaction at all. So there is no kind of relation building between those two people. And relations in the process of education is extremely important, because you learn more from the person when you have a better relation to this person, and you can better understand the background information and the knowledge which this person is having. So I think that there is quite a big difference in those two ways of education in terms of relation and roles between the students and the teacher, which again has to be revealed carefully and trying to be implemented in the best mode possible, because again, distance learning is our future, or at least a part of the future. I think that this question requires much more in-depth research, especially in terms of the particular countries and probably also topics or study courses, study directions, to really understand this interlinkage between education and social discrepancies or social position of a person. Because obviously any person who receives more education, this is the person who has much better chance in life to build up a stronger social position and economical position, which again has a very direct impact on the social position. So that's probably very clear link that if we have more access to the education through the online sources, we will have a better social position. But at the same time, I believe that we have to consider how many people really have the technological access to the study programs, whether they have good computers able to download lots of data, whether the universities or other entities offering that kind of programs, whether they are able to offer not only courses but also extended libraries with the additional material which the student can learn from. Also, we should not forget that online education is usually, actually, if not always, has to be paid for. Where in the traditional learning, in some countries like in Germany, it's for free. In other countries like in Kazakhstan, you can receive grants, be it a state grant or be it a university grant, where you can study in the traditional way, not paying money for this, especially if you have good outcomes of your study. So I think that this is a very important aspect to keep in mind, the question of access to technology, and whether the programs themselves are ready to be offered in such a complexity. But it's certainly a way forward. It's certainly one of the ways to go for the future. At the same time, when we speak about education, we should not forget that it's not only about transferring of knowledge, it's also about building up a person, a human being, socializing and having the soft skills and at a very high level that's also have a primary impact on the social position and probably on the economical position of the person, which again has an impact on the social position. And this is also one of the very important tasks of education, and this is why education is so important, because this is not just doing business, selling knowledge for money. That's much more about sharing and exchanging between the teacher and the student, between the students themselves and maybe students and administration of the university, which helps students and people to socialize and build up those social capacities, which are in the current life maybe sometimes even more important than hard knowledge. So certainly online education, distance learning is much more about knowledge sharing, but it's not so much as traditional learning about sharing and building up the social part, the social capacities and capabilities of the students. The crisis related to coronavirus and the need for education to be forcefully moved from the traditional learning system towards the online learning system, they were really difficult times. So we have seen in our process of teaching and of moving towards the distance learning that there are a few important areas which need improvement. First of all, people. People like teachers, they have to be taught and they have to be trained how to do online teaching, because this is not the same. Traditional teaching is very different, where you have a very clear interaction with students, where you have the questions, answers, where you have interrelation, where you have academic exchange. And in the online mode, this is a very different style, which we have spoken about before. So people must be prepared for this. And obviously very professional teaching will require a lot of time to be invested also for teachers after they've already learned the methodology. So that was certainly the first challenge and the first problem which we can learn from and improve it gradually in the months and years to come. Second issue was related to students themselves. For students, it's also not easy to study in the online mode when they actually are much more in mood to come to the class to exchange with the teacher and with the students. They also sometimes don't have the possibility and the skills to be alone for so many hours and don't have this attitude to do it for so many hours. So it should not be a forceful movement to online. It's much more effective if people who want to study online have this opportunity than for people who don't want to study online just have to do it because this is the situation which we have currently. So there is a lot of work to be done also with the students to support them in terms of technical but also psychological help, and also being able to answer to all of their questions and needs at the particular moment. And certainly third thing is the technological challenge that very often the universities, maybe also the students or even the teachers themselves at the working place at home don't have the tools and the technologies to allow them for good quality teaching. So this is also one of the issues where we have to think about getting more technology into the universities and into the students. Other challenge which we learn gradually about is that even legal system is not necessarily prepared well for the online transfer, because until now there is no clear allowance in Kazakhstan to have postgraduate programs like a master program to be offered fully, entirely in online. So even if it would be a good option for some probably topics, some directions, and also for some people who would like to study in online mode, it's not possible. So when we draw conclusions for our future developments for the particular universities, we also have to think how we can push for the broader legal framework to allow us to implement this system. It's very important indeed to strengthen the social aspect and the social equality probably related aspect of the education. Education is not only about transferring of knowledge, it's about interaction, it's about impacting and shaping of a human being, which is a student and teacher, because it happens in the interaction between two human beings. So that's extremely important, that in the times which we have not chosen, where the move towards online education was not planned and not probably well enough prepared, that we can find also the short-term and long-term solutions to adopt. And first of all, I think that in terms of the students and helping them, that the system is still able to share with them good knowledge, but also in the way when they are capable to receive this knowledge, is to support the student and introduce a number of different systems and help desks and different hotlines and systems which will allow the students to access the person who has the measure, the tool to support in the particular context. For example, IT people, or be it the financial department or any other. So that's the first thing. But also that's very important to support the teachers and to help them to stay in the good teaching mode, because the interaction on the side of the teacher is also very fragile when you sit in front of the computer and you have no access to somebody who gives you a feedback. So this is also a number of help desks or webinars or let's say circles of support within the faculty, which can be and have been created, because it was a requirement of the Ministry of Education, and probably many others universities, not only ours, has implemented successfully. That's the one thing, but at the same time we have to consider that the system of education in the 21st century has to be flexible, has to get more and more flexible to adapt to the different challenges and turn those challenges into opportunities. So one of these challenges basically transfer into the online learning, or at least introduction of some of their components. And of course it will not happen so suddenly in the future. We will be more prepared, but we have to keep in mind that sometimes in the future also other challenges may appear, and we have to work with students, and we have to work with teachers who are flexible. And this is one of the social part of the educational system, this socialization which happens in the higher education and any sector of education, where we have to be ready and become more ready for innovation and answering to the appearing questions.